if you're a business owner, you have to be thinking of selling the business, whether you're going to do it a year, 5 years from now, but your decisions should be made based on, is this decision that I'm making adding value to my business? So you should have the seller's mind. At the end of the day, a business is another product. People are going to buy it. And in this case, because it is your business, everything you do needs to be geared towards increasing the value. The buyer is not going to look at your whole history. At the most, they're going to look at the last 3 years. And in the last 3 years, you've been going like this, it's great. If you've been going like this, it's going to be a red flag. You got to remember one thing. The buyer is always going to be suspicious of every single thing that you do. If they have two ways of interpreting something, they're going to go for the worst, never for the best. For obvious reasons, they're putting their money there.
Yeah.
So we want to minimize as much as you can the potential questions that the buyer might be asking. So it's such a great business. You had it for 2 years. Why are you selling it?
Well, hello everyone. Welcome back. I'm super excited for this topic today. We are going to be going over selling Amazon businesses, which I know is on a lot of people's mind. There's been a huge boon when it comes to people exiting businesses, has always been a thing, but specifically Amazon businesses has its own diverse ecosystem. And so I am really excited to be talking with Claudio Vilas from Sunbelt Business Brokers and being part of a business brokerage. I'm sure you have a lot to teach us on selling your businesses. So welcome. I appreciate you being on.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for having me. As you know, I follow you very much on LinkedIn. I think you do a great job there. And I'm really happy that you invited me to talk with you today about something that's extremely important, which is, selling your business. I've been doing this for many years now. I actually come from the corporate world. I lived in several places in Latin America, and I worked with Johnson & Johnson for most of my life. But one day I decided that I didn't want to continue the corporate life, and I would much rather work in the entrepreneurial life, which is a completely different life. I'm not going to give you the whole history, but at the end of the day, I thought that being a business broker would help a lot of people in this generation change, right? Because there's a lot of people, baby boomers, that are retiring, many younger generations that don't want to be stuck in an old job and they want to do their thing. And quite honestly, the best way to start entrepreneurship is by entrepreneurship through acquisition. So I discovered this profession, if you will, of business broker a few years ago, and I just went all at it. And I really love it. And I love being here and talking with you about it, because I'm sure that many people out there are looking to either exit or maybe moving on to a different business or what have you. And what I find is that most people don't really know how to sell their business. And there's many things that you need to take care of and be aware of before you decide to put the for sale sign.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it is a process. It's not like you wake up one day, decide to sell your business, and are signing papers the next. There's a whole bunch of things that go into it that you need to be aware of. So I'm super excited for you to help us walk through that. And I'm sure we'll get to some of the steps in the process and what you can expect. But first off, I know, especially in the Amazon industry, it used to be a little while back that selling an Amazon business, while it was in fact a true business, there was a little trepidation from typical buyers around buying an Amazon business, and that very much changed. And then also that dynamic shifted in a way with the rise of a bunch of aggregators coming into the Amazon space, and that became sort of a buying frenzy in a way. And I remember the multiples just kind of getting crazy, which multiples I'm sure is something that we're going to touch on. But what are you seeing now? Because it feels like the buzz in a way, not that it's died down, things never go away at some level, business is business and things will continue on. But what are you kind of seeing recently in the landscape?
Well, I see this marketplace kind of being a lot more mature than it was in the past. To your point, valuations were crazy and multiples were crazy, just like in the .com scenario like 20 years ago. Everybody was buying mainly worthless companies for billions of dollars. And I wish I'd been there and sold one of those. But unfortunately, that's not the case with the .com. And it's also not the case with Amazon right now. It's getting more to a main business kind of valuation and multiples, just regular businesses, because now it's mainstream. And, at the beginning, it was it's something new, it's a new shiny object. And even aggregators and other professional buyers, because we're going to talk probably about the types of buyers that you have, but even professional buyers are human. And they were into this frenzy of buying buying businesses, and that's unfortunately not the case. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that it's mature. Now people are looking for return on their investments, and they're not thinking that they're going to build the next Apple or anything like that. So yes, it's more mature. That doesn't mean that there's no demand for businesses. There is demand for businesses. There are many people looking for business out there. There's still the aggregators, but those are not the only buyers, right? So there's a lot of reasons why people buy businesses. And when you think about selling your business, you just have to think of common sense, right? So it's not crazy anymore, but common sense will prevail, and that's what happens most of the time in every market.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so true, because while it is different in a way, because the business is very unique to the Amazon platform because it's centered around like one specific platform, which I think does make it very interesting. That being said, it's still business. General business principles still apply. I often am kind of fascinated with the questions or maybe the concerns or how some sellers who are only familiar with Amazon in this some kind of like microcosm, and that's their first foray into business, which don't get me wrong, it is a great way to start a business. There are so many advantages. I highly believe in the benefit of doing an Amazon business. That being said, sometimes it seems like the Amazon community can sometimes be somewhat in isolation but in reality, business is almost as old as time. So there's so many just like tried and true and good principles that allow you to grow businesses or thrive in businesses that can be applied to Amazon businesses. It's not that they're completely unique and unlike anything else out there.
Yeah, well, you're very right in that Amazon business is Amazon business. It's a business. So as a business, you need to follow the business rules, which basically is businesses that make money survive, businesses that don't make money don't survive. Could be take it a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, but at the end of the day, if you're not able to produce profits, you basically don't have a business, you have a hobby. And that's true anywhere you are. So the reason why those multiples were so high at the beginning, like in the .com, is because people thought that in the future they were going to make a lot more money. It's not that they were just donating their money. No, they thought that the multiple was higher because the future earnings were going to be a lot higher. And that didn't materialize many times. And that's, the issues that we had. But at the end of the day, a business needs to make money. A business needs to be solid. A business needs to be well managed to be able to be sold. Very few people are going to buy businesses that are not doing well because they think they're going to make it better. Okay, some people do. There's some people who are focused on that. But for the most part, if you want to put your business up for sale, you got to make sure that you give the buyer a good reason to buy the business, whether it's an Amazon business or meat market or whatever. It's the same. At the end of the day, you got to make money.
Yeah, I'm super excited to dig into kind of like what you're saying in evaluations, because I know that's a lot of the real questions that sellers have. Even if they're not really looking to buy right now, there is always this question of what can I expect or what can I get for this, just to kind of keep it in the back of your mind. So I'm excited to dig into that.
We're gonna get
but I'd first love to start. So if someone is saying, hey, I'm looking to sell my business, I'd be curious to know, because like you said, the aggregators came up, but there's other types of buyers out there. Where would someone go about finding buyers, or what kind of buyers are you seeing?
Okay, well, there's different kinds of buyers. You can do a broad stroke and say you have strategic buyers on one side and you have financial buyers on one side. That would be the two big divisions, if you will. And then you have the mom and pop, or the person that is leaving corporate and they want to get into a business, and it's smaller, not so much a professional buyer, but a professional, or maybe somebody that has another business. But if you're going to talk about the buyer's division, the strategic buyer is a buyer that is going to buy your business because it fits his or her strategy. Okay, it's going to be somebody that says, okay, well, I have these products and I'm missing this product, or I have these channels and I'm missing this channel. So they probably have different types of channels, other websites, other marketplaces, or brick and mortar, and they say, well, I need an introduction to the channel of Amazon. Well, then that's a strategic reason why you're buying it. Another one is you have all these different products and you're missing a product to fill out your product offering. offer, well, then again, it's strategic. There's more reasons, like, for example, you need better supply chain. And this business specifically that you have and you're selling has the right supply chain. Okay, all those are strategics. Typically, a strategic buyer will be a competitor, a supplier, or somebody that's already in the business. The other one is the financial buyer. The financial buyers are buying mostly the cash flow of the business. And that's a very distinct valuation, okay? And when you ask me about the multiples, a financial buyer is probably going to give you a much lower multiple than a strategic buyer. Sometimes strategic buyers, and I have an example with one company that I'm selling right now, that the buyer doesn't care about the profit. They care about the sales. The reason for that is because they already have a structure and they are looking to absorb these sales, and they already have the structure so they can do synergies, okay? 99% of the time, your profits are going to drive your valuation. So the multiple is going to be there, okay? Now, numbers, today's, the Amazon businesses are very similar to all other businesses. If you're looking at a business that with revenues less than $1 million, you're going to be looking at a valuation, and it's an average, a wild average between 2 and 4, maybe 5 times. If you're selling to a financial buyer, if you start selling to a strategic buyer, because it could be completely different, okay? But for the most part, that's the case. The problem that we have with Amazon sellers, and I've seen it many times, is that if you go to some of these websites and they give you the valuation, they give you multiples that are, I wish you could sell them at that multiple. But it doesn't happen. And the other problem typically is the cocktail parties, right? So you go to a cocktail party, oh yeah, I sold my business for 10 times X, I sold my business for 20 times X. Well, I would really take that with a grain of salt. Each business is going to have a different multiplier, and it's going to be based on different parameters that we can discuss. But, I would say today between 2 and 5 times, depending on where you are.
This is a good benchmark to know. So, and I think that leads perfectly into my next question. It sounds like you might have 2 separate subsections of this. So when it comes to selling the business, what kind of would make your business attractive? You touched on profits, and maybe that's a part of it. I'd really love to have you kind of expand. So if someone's looking to, maybe they said, I'm not going to sell right now, but I can see that exit in the future. What should they be thinking about to kind of make their business more attractive to buyers?
Great question, Elizabeth. And before I answer it, you said something. I'm thinking of selling the business in the future. If you're a business owner, you have to be thinking of selling the business, right? Whether you're going to do it a year from now, 5 years from now, but your decisions should be made based on, is this decision that I'm making adding value to my business? So you should have the seller's mind. At the end of the day, a business is another product. People are going to buy it. So, and in this case, because it is your business, everything you do needs to be geared towards increasing the value, because your job as an entrepreneur is to increase the value of your business. That's what measures you as a successful entrepreneur. Profits are really, really important. Now, profits are not the only important thing when you do evaluation, okay? They're very important, like I said, but not the only one. There's a whole set of parameters that you have to look at. And we can go from top to bottom, looking at the P&L from top to bottom, and you're going to look at sales, how much are you selling? That profit that you have, let's suppose you have a business that makes $1 million a year, in profit, okay? And then you have another business that makes another $1 million. So 2 businesses, they make $1 million each. One of them has revenues for $2 million, and the other one has revenues for $100 million. Percentage-wise is 50% or 10%, or 1 million, 1% actually. That is a very, very different situation, because if you need to sell $100 million to make $1 million, anything that goes wrong will put you immediately in the red. So the buyer is going to be much more prone to buy a 50% margin business than a 1% margin business. So again, profits are important, but what is it in relation to the actual sales? That's one of the things, right? The other one is your growth. How long have you been growing? Is it growing? Last 3 years, have it been growth, or has it been lowering in sales? Once you go through the sales and the relation between sales and profits, then we're going to go a little deeper into the profit and loss, right? And we're going to look into the costs of managing the business. How much fixed cost do you have? How many people are you hiring? How many SKUs do you have to keep? What's your inventory? What's your inventory turnover, right? Are you turning your inventory once a month or once every 3 years, right? I had a situation with actually an Amazon seller that they had inventory for more than 3 years. And it's like, you can't keep inventory like that because your costs are going to be horrible, right? So all of that goes into an evaluation. Once you go out of the P&L and you start looking into the company, the management of the company is really important. You have who are your managers, how long they've been there, what are their qualifications, and so forth, and who are the people that are working with you, right? How long have they been there? Are they qualified? Are they doing a good job? So all of that is also important. As you can see, there's a lot of different variables, and you have to make sure that you hit on them before you say, okay, this is 2 times, 3 times, or 5 times X. Where is the business within their competitors? Where is the business according to their competitor? If you're a leader, is one thing, and if you're a lagger, it's a different thing. So if you're number one in Amazon and everybody's looking at you and you can see that you search for the business and it shows up first, believe me, it's a lot more valuable than if you don't show up at all. So number of stars that you have, people that evaluated your business. I'm selling another business where the sellers were very, very much into social media. And believe it or not, today, we live in a world that's a virtual world. It's all social media. If you're not there, you don't exist. No matter how nice you are, if people don't see you, just don't exist. And people will look at you and they will look at what's, the footprint. What's your virtual or your social media footprint? Is your Facebook going well? Is your Instagram? Is your LinkedIn? Well, of course, depends on the types of business. You're going to have different social media, but social media is there. If you don't have that, it's very hard to even sell the business.
Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of this buyers are looking for, it's very much a risk assessment. They're investing. What is the risk in getting back the returns? And like you were saying about the 2 different types of buyers, the strategic buyers or the financial buyers. Thank you. With the financial buyers, because it is simply a financial investment, that would be why the multiples would be lower, because they absolutely, the only way that they are going to get the ROI on their money is if the business itself will return that. So the risk assessment is going to be much more heavy there versus a strategic buyer. Like you were saying, there could be other ways that they're making ROI on their money, not necessarily just what does that one loan asset produce. I did have a quick question on you when you're saying the growing or are you growing? Are you not growing? I'm sure the people listening are going to wonder, is there a specific percentage of growth that you're looking to see, time frames that you're evaluating? Is there a certain percentage growth that you should be looking to hit, or is it just a growth in general?
Well, it's all relative to your competition and it's all relative to the market that you're in, right? Some markets are completely stable and it's hard to grow, and some markets are booming, and then you need to make sure that you keep up with the market. So it's not a one answer. It depends on which business you have, but it's important that it's growing, because if you look at the life cycle of a business, you start at the beginning, then you start growing, then you plateau, and then you start falling. I'm going to bring it here.
Yeah.
You start falling, right? The buyer is not going to look at your whole history. At the most, you're going to look at the last 3 years. And in the last 3 years, you've been going like this, it's great. If you've been going like this, it's going to be a red flag. So that's basically 3 years is what everybody looks at. Some people look at 5 years, but 99% of the people are going to look at your last 3 years. They're going to ask you about your tax returns. Oh, and the other thing is, and this is very important, how clean are your finances? How clean are if you work with QuickBooks or whatever, can I call you and ask you last month's results, and can you reply to me in 5 minutes, or are you going to take 3 weeks to reply to me? That's not going to go much into the valuation per se, but it's going to go into the whole sales process. When you go into the sales process, and we're going to talk about it as well, when you go into the sales process, you want to make sure that you're prepared to answer questions, because if not, it's going to be very hard for you to sell that business. So time frame, to answer your question shortly, 3 years, and the growth rate, it's got to grow, depends on the type of business that you have. It could be higher or lower.
Are you seeing anyone be able to sell the business if it's been around for less than 3 years? Is that something that just hurts your multiple or maybe just turn off buyers?
It's hard to sell a business that is less than 3 years in the market. It's very hard. Or even if you bought it less than 3 years ago, it's hard. It's not impossible. And some businesses are, really good to be sold at 2 years. But it makes it harder because people are wondering, well, you just started the business. Well, why do you want to sell it? You got to remember one thing. The buyer is always going to be suspicious of every single thing that you do. And if they have two ways of interpreting something, they're going to go for the worst, never for the best. For obvious reasons. They're putting their money there, right?
Yeah.
So you want to minimize as much as you can the potential questions that the buyer might be asking, right? So make sure you have, and that's one. Why are you selling the business? It's such a great business. You had it for 2 years. Why are you selling it, right? It makes no sense to the buyer. It could make sense to you. And if it does, it's a good thing to actually have it written and have those answers thought about before. You think about them before and you have them in writing, which is one of the things that I do with my sellers. So one of the things that we do is we sit down and we think of all the different questions that a buyer might have and make sure we have the answers, and the answers have to come off the top of your head immediately when you get the question.
Well, that's great. It sounds like, again, the risk assessment thing, it sounds like it's simply like in business and working with clients or in any situation, people just want to understand, and especially when it comes to an exit with someone's investing a lot of time and resources and a lot of their capital into something, and they just want to figure out if they're going to see a return. Are there any very definite things? I know you touched on some about like businesses declining or, not having things in place, not seeing the growth trajectory, but is there any other things that you've seen that can really hurt an evaluation?
Let me see. I think I touched on the bigger ones. Well, not for Amazon, okay? This would be mostly for other businesses, but it could be in some of the Amazon sellers when the seller is too much involved in the business. Oh, yeah. But in other businesses, like, for example, I don't know, services, if the seller has a lot of good relationships with their buyers, right, with their clients, that's a red flag. In the case of Amazon, it would be because you're not having that relationship one-on-one with the buyers or with your clients, but you're too much involved in the business. If you are the business, you're not sellable because you can't sell yourself. Yeah. So when you want to work on putting the business up for sale in a year, 2 years, or whenever, start taking yourself out of the business. Start delegating a lot more and make yourself as irrelevant to the business as you can possibly do. And whatever you're doing that can't be delegated, make sure that you have a plan to transfer that knowledge to the buyer. Because buyers want to buy a business that is working and that they don't have such a risk that it could fall through. So to your point again, it's a lot about risk assessment. You're right. So that was one point that.
Yeah, definitely. We are going to get into the length of the selling process because I'm sure that's another question. From what I understand, it's a lot longer than some people think. Like I said, it's not like you wake up one day and you're signing paperwork the next. But before someone even gets to, say, the exit process or looking for the buyers, how far out should you be looking at these things like growth trajectories, planning? Like how far out should you be thinking about the exit?
Oh, great question. Great question, Elizabeth. What I tell to anybody who wants to listen is that you should start thinking of selling the business the day after you buy it. You need to do that. Even if you don't want to sell it, I'll give you a couple of examples of why you want to do that. First of all, because it makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because if you're making the decisions in order to increase the value of your business, you're making the right decisions. That's a given. But you want to sell your business when you want to sell your business. Bear with me for a minute. You don't want to sell your business when you have to sell your business. You want to be in charge on when you want to get rid of that business. But most of the time, you're going to, let me rephrase, you could have to sell that business. If you have to sell the business and you are not prepared, you're never going to get the amount of return on your investment. Life happens. You have accidents. You have illnesses. You have divorces. You have movings. You have a lot of things that you can't predict. So if you're not ready to sell the business, you're not going to get the most out of it. Within this year, so far, 6 months in 2023, I had two situations where one of my clients, they called me because he was diagnosed with cancer and and he couldn't take care of the business anymore. He had to sell it. And he's just not prepared for that. And the other one, a guy that he built a business for 30 years. He went on retirement. He gave his business to his son, and the son died in a car accident.
Oh, my goodness.
And he's not ready to sell the business. So you have to be ready. At least the basic stuff, you have to be ready to do that. And the more you plan for that, the better it's going to be for your business. The more secure you're going to be in your business. Remember, if you are the one who's running the business and all of a sudden something happens to you, what's going to happen to your family? So it's not only a good way of planning, but it's also a good way of avoiding issues in the future.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you have to be ready for it now, that means you don't have time to plan. So if you start by planning, then if and when it occurs, at the very least, you're ready for it, which is a really great point. And then the other point, of course, is about building to sell. Is if you are building to sell, that means the business is less reliant on you. So even if you don't intend on exiting, it does allow you much more freedom to live life in the way that you so choose. So providing someone's kind of thought about it, they're ready, and they're maybe trying to dip their toes into it. Again, this will probably go back to what you touched on, like the different types of buyers and exits. But I'd be curious to know kind of like what multiples or evaluations are you seeing in the market right now?
Well, the business that I'm selling right now, I got two Amazon businesses for sale at this point, and one of them is at about 3.5, and the other one is at 4. And that other one that it's at 4 times, it's been in the market for 2 years. Answering your question before, yes, it can be sold, and I have a lot of buyers, but you know what the problem is? The banks require 3 years of history to give you a loan. And many people buy businesses with a loan, so it's hard to get that. Again, it's better to do it at 3 years, but you could do it at 2. And that's the valuation of my 2 businesses currently. Last year, I had another one that it was about 4.5, almost 5.
Yeah, I mean, those are great benchmarks. Obviously, like you said, it depends on the risk assessment. It depends on the strategic buyer, but it's no longer bananas.com exit multiples.
I wish it was. And Elizabeth, this is important as well. The larger the company, the larger the valuation. If you have, if you're selling $500,000 a year and you're netting $100,000, your multiple, just because of that, is not going to be the same as a large company that makes $2 or $3 million in profits a year. And the reason for that, again, to your point, is risk. A larger company has a lower risk than a smaller company. A larger company gets to have higher multiples because people are willing to spend more because they see less risk.
That's a really, really good point. And then I would also, maybe for my own curiosity as well, when it comes to actually, so I mean, like you sold the business and then, money hits the bank. I know that there's a lot of different, it always amazes me the creativity of the entrepreneurial space or the business space, because there's all different ways. It's not always just one lump sum. Sometimes there's earnouts. Sometimes there's different deal structures. So when it comes to the actual payouts, is there sort of like a standard normal for Amazon type businesses? Does it change a little bit? What does that typically look like?
One of the biggest concerns buyers have is whether Amazon is going to keep me as a supplier or not. And all these rules and regulations and restrictions that Amazon does really affect the buyer, and that's typical in purchase. They want to make sure that the account is going to be transferred and they don't have any problems. And I remember last year with another deal, it never went through because the buyer was just terrified. And we actually contacted him with Amazon consultants. I said, everything's going to be okay. They're going to say, no. And they never went through, and they wanted to buy it, but they were just too scared to do that. Amazon typically will have some kind of an earnout, or at least a year where they will keep escrow, some kind of money just in case anything happens. So you got to be open. And that's the other thing. If you have a business that you can finance, that you can do something like earnouts or seller financing, you can actually increase that multiple, right? Because the buyer is going to say, okay, well, I don't have to put all the money up front. I don't have to go to SBA for a loan. If you are willing to finance the buyer and are willing to stay in the business for a while, that's the other one. Are you willing to stay in the business for a while? You could actually get paid, and you could take chips off the table. You could, if you have a nice company, you could say, okay, well, I'll sell the company, but I'll stay working as a manager for 2-3 years. The buyer is going to love it, and they're willing to pay a little more for that, right? Again, The buyers are concerned that you're just selling them bad fish. And if you're saying, okay, I'm staying with you, I'm not saying, finance 80%, but giving you some kind of seller financing, you're assuring the buyer that what you're selling is good and that you're still interested in helping them grow. And you have to be very open to all those potential deals and deal structures, because it's not only just, here's the money and go. There's a lot of things going on there.
Right. And from my understanding, if you want to, here's the money and go, one, risk assessment for the buyer, they have to be super solid. But then two, it has to be able to run it without you. Because to your point, if you need to be there or the business doesn't function, then if you walk away, the business then has no value because it's not a functioning business. So those are
Absolutely.
really good points to think about. Last couple of questions I'd love to talk on, and one I kind of teased asking in the beginning. When it comes to the selling process, how long does it typically take? Because obviously there's the whole evaluation cycle, and then you finding the buyers, but then also them evaluating the businesses. So what does that typically look like, and maybe sort of like benchmark steps that are involved with that?
Yeah, okay. Typically, in general, you can go to any business website that keeps these statistics, and you will see that it takes at least 6 months to a year to sell a business. Okay, that's when it's sold. But there's many businesses that are never sold for too many reasons, and that's why I want to work with my sellers to prepare the business for sale before we actually go to the market. Because the better you are prepared, the shorter that time frame is going to be. But on average, any business is going to take between 6 and 12 months. It could be longer. I have some businesses that have had them for 2 years and they're still there. It all depends on your willingness to accept the offers. It depends on how the business is structured, how well prepared it is. Everything that we said before not only affects the valuation, it also affects the speed that you're going to have for selling the business. A rule of thumb, 6 to 12 months. It could be increased or it could be decreased. Now, even if you put the business up in the market today and you get an offer tomorrow, it's going to take at least 2 months until all the things are aligned, until the buyer gets the loans for the business, before they do the due diligence. Everything takes time, and everybody is many different things. I mean, it takes just at least 2 months from the moment you signed the contract. Okay, so that's what it tells you. Unfortunately, I wish it was faster. Sometimes I say, why am I selling businesses and not houses? But I'm selling businesses. What am I going to do? That's what I do.
Yeah, it is in a lot of ways a transfer of trust, and that's what you're doing. By say opening the books or giving them access to things, and that's to your point of you saying how open are you willing to be during the selling process. The more closed off you be, the more you create distrust, and again, it's a whole risk assessment, transfer of trust. They're trusting that you're not selling them, like you said, bad fish and lemon, something that they immediately get into and it explodes, and they uncover all of these crazy things that you didn't tell them, which would not put either of you in a good situation. So this has been really interesting. And my very last question for you. So if everyone's hearing this, you would say, okay, I feel like maybe I'm in a good spot, or okay, I know it's going to take some time and things to work through. If a seller wanted to exit their business, what first step? Like, what would be this is the first thing you should go and do if you wanted to get, say, started on the journey? Okay,
the first thing is to have your finances in order. Make sure that you talk with your accountant or bookkeeper or whoever keeps your books and look at that, in detail, and make sure that they make sense. Most of them don't make sense, I'll be honest with you. And so you put that in order, and then you get the buy-in from your accountant that they will help you throughout the process. Because like I said before, many deals fall through because just the buyer, asks questions and nobody has the answers for them. So you gotta do that. Then make sure that you're okay in social media, that you have all those 5 stars, and people can find you when they search for you. And they will do audits of your website and see, what the traffic is to your website. I mean, we're in a day and age where you can't really hide much. So all of that is what they're going to see before they even come and talk to you, right? Where are you in virtual space? And then make sure that, of course, you're going to be making a profit, if at all possible, and you have your processes and your all your flows of business well defined. To the end, another thing that we didn't talk about, but I think it's really important, is you have to be prepared to sell the business. Many people are not mentally there. So they say, I want to sell the business, but they still love that business and they don't want to let it go. And they find any excuse not to let the business go. Make sure that you're prepared. Make sure that you know what your options are. We're just talking about a few of them, earnouts and seller financing. There's more options that you got to be aware of. Make sure you know what you're going to do after you sell the business. Okay, so what's your next step in life? Right? There are all many decisions. And one thing that I typically say is that I work a lot on the finance part, on the marketing part, but also in the personal part and the psychology, if you will. The seller has one thing in mind, and the buyer has a different thing in mind. So how do you put those two together so you can get to the closing table?
That is amazing. And I really appreciate you adding in that last part, because this is oftentimes something somebody has built. So in essence, it's their baby in a way. And sometimes if the finances don't look that great, you have to, like you said, be prepared to sell it, because maybe your baby isn't as pretty as you thought it was, or it's not worth as much as you thought it was, which sometimes I know as entrepreneurs, we can get so tied up in we are the business and the business is us. And it feels like a personal assault when in actuality, it's not. It's just, trying to evaluate. And like you said, looking at that whole risk assessment thing. So I really appreciate you bringing up that piece of the puzzle as well. This has been an insanely great conversation. I've learned so much myself, so I really appreciate it. If someone was interested in getting a hold of you, where could they go to do that?
Oh, they can go to my website, which is cvbusinessbroker.com. And if you go there, you'll see that you have a little video of me welcoming you. And I'm working on that website. I started working on that website actually this year to make it user friendly. So you learn about selling the business, buying a business. There's a lot of content that I'm putting there little by little, and that I would appreciate whoever comes to the website and gives me tips or things that they think they need. I more than welcome that. If not, you can call me 954-774-4141. Or you can email me to claudio.vilas@sunbeltnetwork.com.
Awesome. And of course, all of that will be in the description below. So if you want to go check it out there, hit up those links, get with Claudio, and maybe start that down the path, or at least start figuring out where you fall in this whole process. Again, this has been great, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. I would like to have an invitation for everybody, if you don't mind, because I think it's really important that you know where you're standing today, not a year from now. Where are you today? If you want to contact me, I'm going to do an evaluation of your business. I will do it for free. So contact me and we'll work it out. And once you have the evaluation, doesn't mean that you want to sell the business. It means that you want to know where you are, and then we can work together to get you where you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So you definitely heard that. If you're just trying to figure out how much is this worth? Where am I? Is this something that I should be even thinking about? Definitely make sure that you contact Claudio. Again, all of those links are in the description. And as always, I really appreciate this, and I will see you all in the next one.